A little old man told his wife, "I have to go to my doctor's appointment now. I'll see you later." After he left, his wife settled onto the couch and turned on the television. As she watched, a news report flashed across the screen, announcing that someone was driving the wrong way down the interstate. Knowing that was the exact route her husband would take, she quickly called him to warn him, "Honey, be careful. There's a car going the wrong direction on the interstate." Her husband replied, "One car? They're all going in the wrong direction." One sunny morning, I spotted an elderly woman sitting on a park bench sobbing. Concerned, I approached her. "Are you okay?" I asked. Through her tears, she said, "Oh, I have the best life. I'm married to a 22-year-old man who makes me breakfast in bed, massages my feet, plays guitar for me, and writes me love poems." Amazed, I replied, "That sounds incredible. Why are you crying?" She wailed, "Because I forgot where I live." An angry wife is complaining about her husband spending all his time at the pub. "Every night, you go to the pub and leave me alone at home," the wife complains. So, one night he decides to take her to the pub with him. As they sit at the bar, the husband asks, "What'll you have?" "Oh, I don't know," replies the wife. "The same as you, I suppose." So the husband orders a couple of Jack Daniels and throws his down in one gulp. His wife watches him, then takes a sip from her glass and immediately spits it out. "Yuck, that's nasty," she sputters. "I don't know how you can drink this stuff." "Well, there you go," says the husband. "And you think I'm out enjoying myself every night?" In court, the lawyer leaned forward, visibly confused. "So what exactly happened that you're filing for divorce the day after your wedding night? Surely this can't be serious." The husband shook his head in frustration. "Well, I went into the bedroom feeling excited and romantic. I looked at her and said, 'Take off your bra.' She looked at me, dead serious, and said, 'Take it off yourself.'" The lawyer, still confused, asked, "And that's why you're divorcing her? Seems a little extreme." The husband groaned. "No, you don't get it. I spent half an hour trying to take it off. I gave up at the end. If that's how complicated the start is, I don't want to see what's next." A husband, who happens to be a doctor, and his wife are in the middle of a heated argument at the breakfast table. In a huff, he stands up, points his finger, and snaps. "And for the record, you're no good in bed either," before storming out of the house. After cooling down, he realizes he may have gone too far. Feeling guilty, he decides to call her to apologize. After several rings, she finally picks up. Impatiently, he asks, "What took you so long to answer?" With a calm tone, she replies, "I was in bed." "In bed? At this hour? Doing what? Getting a second opinion?" Two men were having a painfully slow round of golf. The two ladies playing ahead seemed to find every sand trap, lake, and rough on the course, making no effort to wave the men through, which would have been proper golf etiquette. After 2 long hours, one of the men finally said, "I think I'll walk up and ask those ladies to let us play through." He started toward the ladies, but halfway there, he stopped, turned around, and came back with a troubled look. "I can't do it," he explained. "One of those women is my wife, and the other is my mistress. Maybe you'd better go talk to them." The second man agreed and walked toward the ladies. But just as he reached the halfway mark, he too stopped, turned around, and walked back with an embarrassed grin. "Small world?" he said. A husband and wife are sitting on the couch watching TV. The wife looks at the husband, and he is staring at the ceiling above her head. She looks up and asks, "What are you staring at?" "A spider," he replies. "I don't see anything," she says. "Oh, it must have fallen on your head," he said calmly. The wife jumps up screaming, The man says, "While you're up, can you get me another beer?" One Sunday, while counting the money from the weekly offering, the pastor of Granville Christian Church discovered a pink envelope containing $1,000. The same thing happened the next week. Curious, the pastor kept an eye on the collection and noticed an elderly woman placing the distinctive pink envelope into the plate. This continued for several weeks until the pastor, filled with curiosity, approached her. "Ma'am, I couldn't help but notice that you contribute $1,000 every week," he said. "Yes," she replied. "Every week my son sends me money, and I give some of it to the church." The pastor, impressed, asked, "That's wonderful. How much does he send you?" The old woman answered, $10,000 a week. The pastor was amazed. "Your son must be very successful. What does he do for a living?" "He's a veterinarian," she said. "That's an honorable profession," the pastor remarked. "Where does he practice?" With pride, the old lady replied, "In Nevada. He owns 2 cat houses in Las Vegas and 1 in Reno." It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and the receptionist at a swanky hotel was just beginning to nod off when a little old lady came dashing towards her, yelling, "Please, come quickly. I just saw a man outside my window." Startled, the receptionist immediately rushed to the old lady's room. "Where is he?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "Over there," the woman replied, pointing to an apartment building across from the hotel. The receptionist peered over and spotted a man in his apartment, shirtless, moving around as if getting ready for bed. "It's probably just someone getting ready to turn in," she said, trying to reassure the woman. "Besides, you can only see him from the waist up. How do you even know he's naked?" The old lady looked at her with wide eyes and exclaimed, "The dresser, honey. Try standing on the dresser." 2 rednecks decided to travel to Canada for a hunting adventure. They chose to hire a small aircraft to transport them into the Rockies for a week to hunt moose. Successfully, they managed to hunt down 6 moose. As they were packing the plane to go back, the pilot informed them that the plane could only accommodate 4 moose due to weight restrictions. The 2 country folks weren't happy and protested strongly. "Last year we managed to hunt 6 moose, and the pilot allowed us to bring them all back, and he had the same type of aircraft as yours," they argued. Reluctantly and against his better judgment, the pilot agreed, and all 6 moose were loaded onto the plane. The plane managed to take off, but while trying to cross over some mountains, the small aircraft couldn't handle the heavy load and ended up crashing. Miraculously, nestled among the moose carcasses, only the 2 rednecks survived the crash. After emerging from the wreckage, one of them, Billy Ray, asked his friend, "Billy Bob, do you know where we might be?" Billy Bob replied thoughtfully, "Yeah, I think we're pretty close to where we crashed last year." A husband and wife were driving from Key West to Boston, and after nearly 24 hours on the road, exhaustion set in. They decided to take a break and stopped at a nice hotel, planning to get a quick 4-hour rest before hitting the road again. But when they checked out, the desk clerk handed them a bill for $350. Shocked, the man demanded an explanation. "This is a nice hotel, but the rooms are nowhere near worth $350 for 4 hours. The clerk explained, $350 is our standard rate. Frustrated, the man asked to speak to the manager. The manager arrived and explained, "Our rate includes access to our Olympic-sized pool and our top-notch conference center." "But we didn't use any of that," the man protested. "Well, they were here and you could have," the manager replied. He continued, mentioning that the hotel hosts shows featuring top entertainers from New York, Hollywood, and Las Vegas. "We didn't see any shows," the man objected. "Still, they were available to you," the manager replied, unbothered. Despite the man's protests, the manager held firm. Finally, the man gave up, took out his checkbook, and wrote a check for $100, handing it to the manager. The manager looked at the check confused. "Sir, this is only for $100. "That's right," the man replied. "I charged you $250 for sleeping with my wife." The manager, taken aback, exclaimed, "But I didn't." The man smiled. "Well, she was here, and you could have." Once upon a time, a farmer named Patrick lived quietly in the Irish countryside with his faithful dog as his only companion. One day, the dog passed away, and feeling the loss deeply, Patrick decided to visit the parish priest. "Father," he said, "my dear dog has died. Would you be willing to say a mass for the poor creature?" The priest shook his head, replying, "I'm sorry, Patrick, but we don't hold services for animals here. However, there's a new congregation down the road. No telling what they might offer. But perhaps they'd consider something for your dog." Patrick nodded thoughtfully. "All right, I'll try them," he said. Then as he turned to go, he added, "Do you think a €5,000 donation would be enough for the service?" The priest's eyes widened. "Good heavens, Patrick! Why didn't you tell me your dog was Catholic?" Ed and Carolyn met on a singles cruise, and Ed was instantly smitten. When they found out they lived just a few miles apart, Ed couldn't believe his luck. As soon as they were back home, he started planning dates, taking her to dance clubs, restaurants, concerts, movies, you name it. Each date felt more magical than the last, and soon Ed was convinced Carolyn was his soulmate. On the 1-month anniversary of their first dinner on the cruise, Ed took Carolyn to a fancy restaurant. As they sipped cocktails, Ed leaned in and said, "I think you know how much I care about you. Before things get any more serious, there's something I have to confess. I'm a huge golf fanatic. I play golf, watch golf, read about golf. It's practically my life. If that's a deal breaker, I'd rather know now." Carolyn took a deep breath and replied, "Ed, that's no problem. I love you, and I love golf too. But since we're being honest, there's something you should know. For the past 5 years, I've been a hooker." Ed chuckled, taking her hands in his. "No worries. I bet that's just because you're not keeping your wrists straight when you swing." A young boy sits at the kitchen table, diligently working on his math homework. As he adds each problem, he mutters to himself, 2 plus 5, the son of a gun is 7. 3 plus 6, the son of a gun is 9. His mother, overhearing, is stunned. "What did you just say?" The boy looks up innocently and replies, "I'm doing my homework. That's how my teacher explained it." The next day, his mother, furious, marches to the school and confronts the teacher. "What are you teaching my son in math? He keeps saying 2 plus 2, the son of a gun is 4. The teacher laughs and shakes her head. "Oh no, I told them 2 plus 2, the sum of which is 4. A new retirement home opened in the community, featuring separate floors for men and women. After a few weeks of operation, all the residents were called into the recreation room for a staff meeting to explain the house rules. It was stressed that after hours there would be no men on the women's floor and no women on the men's floor. Violating this rule would result in a fine. $25 for the first offense, $50 for the second, and $100 for the third. Suddenly, a hand shot up from the back of the room, and a voice asked, "How much for a season pass?" Last night, I met this charming woman at a bar. She was in her 60s, but carried herself so well that she looked years younger. I couldn't help but think, wow, she must have passed some great genes down to her kids. We hit it off, shared a few laughs over a couple of beers, and then she leaned in with a playful look and asked, "Ever heard of a sportsman's double?" Curious, I asked, "What's that?" With a grin, she said, "It's when 2 generations team up." I laughed, thinking she had quite the sense of humor. After a bit more chatting, she smiled and said, "Well, you're in for a fun surprise tonight." Intrigued, I followed her back to her place. When we got there, she turned on the hallway light and called upstairs, Mom, you still awake? 3 cheeky old grannies were sitting on a bench outside their nursing home when an elderly man strolled by. One of them called out, "Hey there, bet we can guess exactly how old you are." The old man chuckled. "Oh, I highly doubt that." "Sure we can," another granny chimed in. "Just drop your pants and we'll tell you your exact age." Slightly embarrassed, but determined to prove them wrong, he lowered his pants. The ladies had him turn around, jump a few times, and even do a little jig. After a moment, they all exclaimed together, "You're 87 years old." Amazed, the man, still standing there with his pants down, asked, "How in the world did you figure that out?" Grinning from ear to ear, the grannies burst out laughing and said, "We were at your birthday party yesterday." An elderly woman walked up to the checkout counter at the grocery store and said to the young clerk, "I'd like to buy half a head of lettuce." The young man looked at her and replied, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we only sell whole heads of lettuce." The woman, unfazed, responded, "Well, I'm old and I don't eat very much. When I buy a whole head of lettuce, half of it always goes to waste. Could you ask your supervisor if there's anything he could do?" Reluctantly, the young man sighed and walked toward the back of the store to speak with his supervisor. As he entered the office, he said, "Hey, some cranky old lady wants to buy half a head of lettuce." But as he turned, he realized the elderly woman had followed him and was standing right behind him, having heard every word. Without missing a beat, he quickly added, "And this charming young lady would like to buy the other half, so it works out perfectly." The supervisor smiled, worked things out, and the elderly woman left the store happy. Afterward, the supervisor turned to the young man and said, "That was quick thinking. Where are you from?" The young man puffed out his chest and replied, "Oh, I'm from Canada, but I left because it's just filled with hockey players and, well, ladies of the night." The supervisor's face darkened. "My wife is from Canada." Without missing a beat, the young man grinned and said, "Oh, that's wonderful. What team does she play for?" A blonde sees a cow with no horns. So she asks the farmer, "Excuse me, but why wouldn't a cow have any horns?" The farmer replies, "Well, ma'am, there are several reasons a cow might not have horns. Firstly, some breeds just don't have horns. Another reason is sometimes we cut them off when a cow gets too rambunctious and too dangerous to handle and be around. Yet another reason is because sometimes when they are calves, we put a type of acid where the horns are growing, and this stops the horns from forming." The blonde then points and asks, "Okay, but what about that cow? Why doesn't it have any horns?" The farmer replies, "Well, ma'am, the reason why that particular cow has no horns is because it's a horse."